So Maelgwyn, dressed in mundanes, is going to be our teacher here.
Hi.
And you are being recorded.
So we are live and online. So welcome. So far I've heard we have one student. Who knows, more may join as we go. Meanwhile, let's start off with a little story. Once upon a time, there was a deer who was playing in the woods and fields of central Ansteorra, and got shot. And the hunter very carefully field dressed the deer, took the deer to his friend, the deer processor, who turned the deer into venison sausage and roast and stew meat and all the wonderful things we get from deer, and threw the hide apparently in a corner. Or he may have actually skinned this outdoors and threw the hide in a pile of leaves and twigs and oak balls. So the hunter then very carefully gathered up the hide and put it in a trash bag and threw it in the freezer, where it's been until a couple of weeks ago.
No, it's been in my fridge until a couple
of weeks ago. We pulled it from the freezer to the refrigerator so it would partially thaw, because we thought we might use it for a class I was teaching on parchment making. But the weather wasn't so great, and we decided to do the class with all photographs and shoot it from indoors. And so the hide just stayed in the refrigerator until today, when my lovely and thoughtful wife pointed out that the hide had been in the refrigerator and not the freezer for a couple of weeks, and it might be time for it to go someplace else before the day was over. So, Exhibit 1, hide. Exactly, carefully piled together the way the hunter left it. Now, this hunter knew that I was going to be doing something with this hide, so he took more than zero care about how well it was cut off the carcass, which is not to say much care, but was more than zero. This is typical. This is what we normally get in the Ansteorran Parchment project. And having used that fancy term, I should tell you a little bit about the Ansteorran Parchment project. So there's a project in Ansteorra to collect hides, process them, and make parchment, so that every local group has parchment to use for their championship scrolls and for their peerage scrolls and for any ducal or county scrolls that are needed. We're not trying to replace all of the charters, but anytime when you do a one-off original scroll, why not do it on parchment? This marvelous parchment process, the raw materials were provided to me for free. If I would say out loud in public that I would take the hides from any deer they shoot, I would have more hides than I have room for in the freezer, because there are too many hunters in Central Texas that would be happy to get rid of the hides because they have no use for them. This is also true everywhere else in the known world. So there's no reason not to take free hides that are freely available and do a little grunt work, a little labor, to turn them into the authentic and beautiful raw material for making beautiful scrolls. This is a process that does not require artisanship. It does not require fine calligraphy skills. It's something that the rest of us can do to help out. If you think about it, scribes donate tons and tons of time, just an incredible number of hours, creating scrolls that they give away for free, or that they give to the various royals and nobles to give away for free. So it doesn't really make sense to say, well, you know, scribes, well, you're making me a free scroll. Could you go out and shoot the deer and make some parchment first? No. So I want to provide scribes with the raw materials so that they can add their artistry to them and make beautiful things for Ansteorra. But what I get from the hunters looks like this. And it is like this.
Oh, sorry.
And it is a bloody mess. So here I'm going to do the unveiling. I'm going to try to straighten out this hide that has been frozen and lumped together. And I see some oak galls and lots of oak twigs. I'm pretty sure this one was skinned outdoors. Okay. Did I forget to mention that if you are particularly squeamish, this is not the class for you? let me repeat, if you are particularly squeamish, this is not the class for you, because this is a bloody mess. And the next thing that needs to happen in the parchment making process is that it needs to be soaked in a lime bath for about a week so that the hair will all loosen up and be able to be, excuse me, yeah, be able to be scraped off of this hide rather easily. But if I take all this blood and meat and put it in the lime bath for a week, it will become less pleasant than it is now. If I did that in the summer, it would be a whole lot less pleasant. So,
Can I jump in for a second? By the way, this is informal, so if you want to unmute and talk during it, you're welcome to do so.
please
I'm going to
feel
have
free.
a little less control over the chat than I did on the last one, since I'm having to hold the camera up.
So feel free to jump in with questions if you have questions. And this, despite sitting in the refrigerator for a week, is still quite frozen in spots. Now, let me let you in on a secret that the hunters don't know. I can't really make parchment out of leg fur. So you don't have to preserve every inch of the leg. And as a parchmenter, you need to learn this and learn to live by it. So if you're trying to save every last possible square inch of material from this deer, look, it's a deer. The skin was free. We'll get another one. If there's a raggedy bit in the corner, just cut it off. If there's a half of the leg still attached, just cut it off. Trying to do a lot of work to turn that into a useful piece of parchment, it's just not gonna pay off in the long run. So here, this is just still frozen together. We're just pulling it apart. You can see lots of ice crystals in there, right along with the twigs and the live oak leaves.
Hey, Maelgwyn, what does that smell like right now?
Oh, I can't smell anything, actually.
It's not
Yeah,
particularly
it's
aromatic. If I got closer to it, it smells like venison, which is no better or worse than smelling like beef. It's just a little different.
Yeah. So
I was just worried
even
because it
after
was in
having been in the fridge, it's not too bad.
Oh,
It was a cold fridge.
it was frozen
Yeah.
before it went in the fridge, and so it
Right.
is still a lot of ice crystals here. This is not a rotted hide at all.
But he could have put it off for another month, and by then it would have been sort of nasty. Well, yeah.
So at this point, I'm just stretching it out a little bit. Got this nice handle here. The hunter left the tail on. Again, for parchment purposes, I don't really need the tail. Somebody really wants to try to work with or preserve a deer tail, I've got a free deer tail available, genuine white tail.
I think I can't remember if we used some of that for paint brushes before or not.
Fly fishers might be interested in that.
Oh, fly fishers, yeah. We know one.
Yes, you could make authentic medieval fishing flies with deer fur. Anyone wants to pursue that, I have plenty of deer fur. I do have an open question out amongst the artisans. If anyone has a use for deer fur that has been scraped off of a hide, we produce bucketfuls of it in this process and have no productive use for it.
Because it's full of alum, so you got to get that cleaned out.
Well, no, at that point, no alum, lime.
Oh, lime. I'm sorry. It's full of lime.
It's full of lime, so it has to be rinsed. It's water soluble.
Let's go backwards.
Deer hair bugs are really good around this area. For
So what's really
The what bugs?
deer hair poppers or deer hair bugs, like popping bugs for
Oh, I see. Fishing flies.
bats. It's actually really, really,
okay.
really good in this
Yeah.
area.
Turn around so you can see some more here. My shadow may get in the way.
Okay, apparently, whoever skinned this deer wasn't too worried about getting the meat off around the neck or right around this leg. Or I think there may be some bone left in this leg. I mean, it's just, there's a lot here right now. But I'm going to go ahead and clamp it at this end. This is also a point at which having two people working the hide is a big advantage because one can hold it and pull it and shift it while the other one is working and scraping it. We do have two people here, but one of them is dressed way too nice to
And holding
get
a
into this
camera.
hide and just doing very important camera work. So I'm going to use some clamps to get a hold of this hide and try to hold it on that end so that as I work it toward this end, I'll be okay. Anyone want to make oat gall ink? I just lost an oat gall. Again, this is still frozen solid. That's just just a meaty spot there, but it's
So this one is supposed to remind you about goggles and ask why you're not wearing gloves, right?
sure. So this is a great time to remind me about goggles, because when I start working this, it's going to splash some, and wearing goggles just seems like a really good idea.
How about gloves?
I don't need gloves for this. There's nothing toxic or harmful here. If I'm after it's been in the Lyme bath, I would want to use gloves, because the Lyme will really dry out and parch your skin and make it itchy and feel raw. You just want to go there.
Okay.
So it'll take all the oils out. Okay, I've got it stretched a little bit here. I think I'm trying to hose this down.
I'm going to step back for that. All right.
Tom, you can fit that too. You might introduce Tom.
See what? If you see an orange cat floating around, that's Thomas O'Malley, our alley cat, which we adopted and fixed. So now he goes around the alley and shoots blinds. So you're just rinsing off the dirt and the leaves. It doesn't really take any of the meat off.
Right.
It might take a little blood off.
Yeah. Any luck?
I'm getting slight spray from over here, but it so far doesn't seem to be affecting the camera. So just feels good.
I'm starting to wish I had a little more water pressure. Now again, it's getting a little bit of stuff off, but I'm gonna have to do some work here. I'm also just running some water over it to help it warm up, thaw out some of those ice crystals. Oh, there was a chunk of meat that just wanted to roll right off.
By the way, you're about halfway through your time.
Okay.
Can't
Thank you.
stop.
Okay. From what I can see, when they got down to this end, they did a really great job of skinning and getting it right at the membrane level, which is good. For what I'm doing right now, having the membrane still on is fine. Even a little bit of fat is fine, but it's this red steak material here that we really don't want. Okay. So I'm going to try to get some of these leaves and sticks to go ahead and move off. And again, you could wear gloves for this stuff if you felt like it. If you know, some people would just be less than thrilled about having their hands on uncooked deer meat.
And he wanted to show you what you get when it comes directly from the hunter, which is why we didn't start with it already all stretched out and pretty for you.
Yeah. If you wanted a pretty process, this is probably not the art form for you. Okay, that'll come off in the front.
Yeah,
I just want you to see that there's some areas that'll be
if you shrunk the water, I'll come closer.
pretty good shape.
Okay.
And some areas that really aren't.
All right.
So now I'm going to get out one of my favorite tools here. The two-handed hide scraping knife. It's got a little bit of a curve to it so that I can work it with the curve of the barrel, or if I need to get a lot of pressure in one spot, like if this piece of flesh here would give me some trouble, I can turn it so I've got the narrowest striking area as possible. Okay, now anything I do, this is going to be kind of spongy because there's a thick layer of fur on the other side of this hide. So it's not going to get a really tight compression against the barrel. Now, if we were in a proper medieval setting, I would be using a log instead of a barrel. But the barrel's got the right curvature. It stimulates a log pretty well.
Maelgwyn, that's not a standard, just straight up standard draw knife, is it?
No, this is a purposely made hide scraping knife. It uses what we call the dull sharpness. So it has edges, but they are beveled and rounded, and so that they will get good pressure and a good scrape without cutting through the hide.
So do you put a burr on those like with a burnisher, or is it more rounded than that?
More rounded than that. Actually, we'll use a sanding block and remove any burrs.
Okay,
Those
yeah,
foam sanding blocks.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't want it sharp.
Now you've also used just a bar of aluminum, right?
Yes,
Square bar.
This is a simple rectangular bar of stock metal. Aluminum is good because iron has certain implications for colors and the dyeing processes later. You don't want to get, especially if your oak galls are providing tannin, you don't want to suddenly be creating black dye while you're scraping your hide.
Yeah, iron and oak.
Scribes won't thank you for that.
Yeah, they'll turn black pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is just being difficult for me here today. Does not want to start coming up. So I can get more aggressive. Reach into my stash of tools. This knife uses the sharp sharpness, not the dull sharpness. And I'm going to be very careful drawing with this knife. I want to get down to the right layer without going too deep. See, I get this down to the membrane layer. Start persuading it to come up.
Trying to get a good angle. You got a little bit of shadow there. Yeah, it's all right. But see how that just skins upward if you do it right? That's what you want to see happening.
Now, if somebody really likes you and they know what they're doing, they might scrape it this way when they're skinning the deer in the first place. But I wouldn't hold your breath for that one. If they're willing to donate their hide for the deer they shot, you'll have to thank them for that. Doing a perfect job of skinning it would be a little much to ask. So I'm just going to work this way a little bit. Now, you might think that I've got just a nice little venison, bit ready to fry up there, but you have to keep in mind, this hide was thrown on the ground. From the moment it was scraped off the deer, they did not intend it for food use. So it is not for food use. Now, this is why I have a tarp down on the ground. I want to clean this up later. I don't want to have to be very carefully dealing with every individual piece that comes off.
Showing the setup real fast. There you go.
I got a thicker section over here, which is still frozen. That's going to be really hard to work unless I can cut through it.
So you're trying to cut slice along the skin here. There's actually a lot of thickness here. It's hard to cut through. It's possible, but it's hard.
Especially with that fur underlayer, it's just, I can't pinch it against the barrel enough to cut through it. And again, I don't have to get every last scrap, every last molecule of flesh here. If there's a little bit left here, that's not going to do any great harm. I just want to get the bulk of it off of here so that we don't have as much blood and as much bacteria food in the Lyme bath. Okay.
So younger animals, if you get a very small baby goat, we do not call it by its other term, a baby goat, it's harder. You've got to be a lot gentler, but they also don't have as much thick membrane. That membrane is something that builds up as you get older. So it's
like joint pain. Oh, wait.
It is, yeah. Actually, it's related to joint pain. So it isn't as big of a concern there. So we can be pretty solid on this. Not worry too much. As long as you slice along the grain, along the, not straight down.
Are you saying that I have a thick membrane?
You probably do. I know that I'm developing one.
You also learn as you work with this that the hides are of different thicknesses in different areas. The back of the neck is much thicker than the middle of the back. The belly hide is much thinner than any place else. And again, younger animal, thinner hide.
You see that membrane lifting.
Almost like it's like peeling silver skin that you see sometimes on pork or.
Yeah, it is. It's just peeling away.
Yeah.
And and it will peel away beautifully, and you'll be going fast, and then you'll hit a hard spot where you need to use words of power to get it to release. Slide down around the edge there. Try to hold it so you don't shake as much.
You notice at no time do I cut myself with this knife. There's a little purple spot there. I wonder what's going on with that. Sometimes you learn about the life of the deer in this process. You'll find scratched spots where they encountered thorns. Or one time I was doing this kind of scraping and I found the bullet. Bullet had gone in one side through the deer and gotten caught in the hide on the other side. So there we go.
Ugh.
Progress.
Okay.
You see, we're moving along here. Again, I decided I don't have a good use for this tail. No point in putting any more time into it.
You got about 6 minutes, so if you want to talk about anything else while you're working, feel free.
Okay, so once this step is done, it's going to go into a Lyme bath for 4 days to a week, depending on temperatures and a few other factors. But when it comes out of the Lyme bath, I'm going to put it right back on this scudding barrel, and I'm going to scud both sides. I'm going to scud the hair side until all the hair is off. And that's actually going to go pretty quickly. If it's had the right amount of Lyme bath, it'll go off really smooth and easy. If it has had too much Lyme, there's hardly such a thing. If it's had too much Lyme, it's not that the hair has had any problems, but that the rest of the materials have been at room temperature for a long time. They're going to be a little more aromatic. Okay, and if you've had too little time in the Lyme bath, you're going to be working harder getting that hair off. So you'll be really scraping hard with that two-handed knife, or in some cases having to get in there with a sharp knife and get it to let go.
Now we're going into the Lyme bath to take the hair off. If we wanted to not take the hair off and turn it into leather, then it would go directly into an alum.
Right. It actually would go into scraping.
Scraping.
So if I was going to make a fur out of this, a leather with hair still on, then I would do this step very thoroughly and then stretch the hide, probably a rinse in between, but then stretch the hide and scrape it with hide scraping with a rounded head knife.
Okay.
It's a whole different process we'll talk about some in another class.
Yeah.
Or if you caught my class a couple of weeks ago at Known World Tribes and Heralds Symposium, we went into that in some detail.
And if you're going into tanning the leather, you would go through the hair removals process with the Lyme before going into that. And if you're going into parchment making, you also go through the hair removal process as the next step, right?
Yes.
So those are all.
Essentially, we would do the hair removal, do the next round of scraping. If I was making rawhide, I would just leave it at that point. I would scrape it very thoroughly to make parchment. And then if I wanted to make leather, after having scraped it, I would take it back into a rinse and then into an alum bath or a tannin bath, depending on what tanning process I plan to use.
So what if you didn't have time to go directly into the alum?
If I don't have time to go directly into the alum, I can just stretch the hide, let it dry, and then stack it. It's perfectly stable at that point.
No, I meant here, after this one,
Here.
with the hair still on.
I could stretch it, let it dry, and let it become a raw hide.
Or you could roll it up, stick it back in the freezer,
Put it back in the
because
freezer.
it's smaller without the meat, right?
This is true.
Which is useful considering that sometimes we have time, we don't have time, since this is a hobby. All right. You have 3 minutes, by the way. Any questions from the audience? Anything you want me to get closer on so you can see what's going on? Sort
Good
of,
chunk of fat there.
yeah. It's not much different than trying to process a piece of meat in the kitchen, except that you don't want to save anything left over.
Do you use that barrel for the Lyme bath?
I actually use a slightly larger barrel, but yeah, I use big barrels for Lyme
barrels.
bath.
So those are the big barrels that we use.
You can see another scudding stand over there. It uses a smaller diameter pipe.
I'll go and show you that real fast. There's a smaller diameter one. We found we like the bigger diameter. You can get more spread. This one gives you a little bit more of a targeted. And it's basically it's a sawhorse that's been
Sawhorse and
clamped on.
PVC. Yeah.
Yep. But we
Okay.
like the bigger one. This one here,
Yeah.
although it has a couple of ridges that do cause trouble if you're trying to cut it with a knife. So you have to work around the ridges.
Yeah. So is that just a drum that you've got sort of propped
Yeah,
up
this
on
is
a,
like a 35-gallon
Yeah.
standard commercial plastic drum.
yeah.
Buy them pretty cheap. You
Or
know
you-
somebody who knows somebody, you might be able to get one that's being given away for free. Otherwise, I usually pay about $20 for one or something like that.
Yeah.
You can see it just picks up. Comes right off. Until it doesn't.
See, right at the joint, you want to zoom in here, right at the joint between the hide and the meat, you can see a little almost translucent area. If I can cut right at it, it will just continue to roll right along. You can see that spot where the fibers are being stretched, and that's where I really want to cut it.
Okay, you've got about 1 minute left. He's got a lot more work than 1 minute, but I thought the 30 minutes of watching him clean up a hide was probably enough.
Again, the bottom line here is that this is a project that requires a certain amount of craftsmanship, but not artistry. And so if you would like to make a contribution to your kingdom's supply of parchment, to being part of a society that has parchment scrolls, this is the project you can jump into and learn as you go. We're always looking for more volunteers when we do regional workshop days. I will host one here a couple times a year, especially when we're allowed to get together without masks again. And really appreciate any support we can get to make sure we've got good parchment available for people, and so we don't have to use paper when our medieval forebears would have used parchment.